My hands were shaking as I scrubbed the marble floor of Vincent Romano's mansion for what I thought would be the last time. I had finally saved enough money to disappear with my son Tommy, to start fresh somewhere far from Chicago's dangerous streets. But as I heard the heavy footsteps approaching the kitchen, my heart sank. I knew that voice before he even spoke. "Going somewhere, Isabella?" Vincent's deep voice cut through the silence like a blade. I froze, my cleaning rag still in my hand, soap suds dripping onto the pristine floor. How did he know? I had been so careful, so quiet about my plans. I slowly turned around to face the most feared man in Chicago, the man whose house I had been cleaning for 6 months, the man whose dark eyes had been haunting my dreams. "I was just finishing up, Mr. Romano," I whispered, my voice barely audible. His steel gray eyes studied me with an intensity that made my knees weak. Vincent Romano wasn't just any man. He was the head of the most powerful crime family in the Midwest. And somehow, impossibly, I had fallen for him. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had a 3-year-old son hidden away in a tiny apartment across town. A son whose father had abandoned us, leaving me to work 3 jobs just to survive. A son I would do anything to protect, even if it meant running from the only man who had ever made me feel truly alive. "Before you go," he said, stepping closer, "there's something we need to discuss." That's when we heard it. A small, desperate knock on the front door. If you want to know how I got here, subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This is my story, and you won't believe how it started. 6 months earlier, I was just another invisible woman in Chicago, working 3 jobs to keep my head above water. My name is Isabella Martinez, and at 24, I felt like I had already lived 3 lifetimes. Every morning at 5 a.m., I'd kiss my sleeping son Tommy goodbye and head out to clean office buildings downtown. Then I'd rush to my afternoon shift at Romano's mansion in Lincoln Park and finish my day serving tables at a diner until midnight. Tommy's father, Marcus, had vanished the moment I told him I was pregnant. "I'm not ready for this," he'd said. Like fatherhood was a jacket he could simply choose not to wear. So it was just me and Tommy against the world, living in a cramped studio apartment where the heat barely worked and the neighbors were either too loud or too quiet. The kind of quiet that meant trouble. I had been working at the Romano mansion for 2 weeks when I first really saw Vincent. Oh, I'd glimpsed him before. A tall figure in expensive suits moving through the house like he owned not just the building, but the very air inside it. The other staff whispered about him in hushed tones, crossing themselves when they mentioned his name. "Don't look him in the eye." Maria, the head housekeeper, had warned me on my first day, "Don't speak unless spoken to. And whatever you do, don't ask questions." But that Tuesday afternoon in October, everything changed. I was cleaning the massive library, running my cloth over the leather-bound books that probably cost more than I made in a year when I heard shouting from the main hallway. Male voices, angry and threatening. My hands froze on the bookshelf as I recognized the tone. It was the same tone Marcus used to use right before he'd slam doors and disappear for days. "You have 48 hours, Romano." A growly voice snarled. "Pay up, or we start taking things that matter to you." "Get out of my house," came the response, and I felt my breath catch. Vincent's voice was deadly calm, but there was something underneath it that made my skin prickle with danger. I should have minded my own business. I should have kept cleaning and pretended I heard nothing. But curiosity had always been my weakness, and I found myself creeping toward the library door, straining to hear more. "This isn't over," the first voice said. "The Torino family doesn't forget debts." "Neither do I," Vincent replied. And there was something in those 3 words that made my blood run cold. I heard footsteps, heavy boots moving toward the front door, then the slam that shook the entire house. In the silence that followed, I realized I was holding my breath. I quickly moved back to the bookshelf, trying to look busy, but my hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped my cleaning supplies. That's when I heard different footsteps, measured, deliberate, coming toward the library. The door opened, and Vincent Romano stepped inside. I had never been this close to him before, and the impact was like a physical blow. He was tall, probably 6 feet 3 inches, with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit perfectly. His dark hair was slightly messed from running his hands through it, and his gray eyes were stormy with barely contained anger. But it wasn't his obvious wealth or power that made my heart skip. It was the exhaustion I saw in his face, the weight he carried that reminded me of my own struggles. You heard that, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Are you going to run to the newspapers? Sell your story to the highest bidder. His voice was tired, like he'd had this conversation before. No, sir, I managed to whisper. I clean houses, that's all. He studied me for a long moment, and I felt exposed like he could see every secret I'd ever kept. What's your name? Isabella. Isabella Martinez. How long have you been working here, Isabella? 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, what have you observed about this house? I swallowed hard, thinking of Maria's warnings. That it's beautiful, that the people who work here respect you. And that, I hesitated. And that what? That you work very hard? I said quietly. I see the lights in your office until very late. I see the phone calls that make you look tired. You carry a lot. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. Most people see the suits and the cars and think that's all there is. I know what it's like to carry weight, I said before I could stop myself. Different weight, but I understand. We stood there in silence for a moment, and I felt something pass between us. A connection I definitely shouldn't be feeling with a man like Vincent Romano. Isabella, he said finally, I need to know I can trust you. You can because if I can't, he didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. You can, I repeated and meant it. He nodded once, then turned to leave. But at the door he paused. The Torino family, they're dangerous people. If you see anyone around here who doesn't belong, anyone asking questions about me or this house, you tell me immediately. Understood? Yes, sir. And Isabella? He looked back at me. Thank you for what you said about carrying weight. Not many people understand that. After he left, I stood alone in the library, my heart pounding. I had just had a real conversation with Vincent Romano, and instead of feeling afraid, I felt seen. For the first time in years, someone had looked at me like I was more than just the help. But as I went back to cleaning, a cold dread settled in my stomach. I thought about Tommy, safe in daycare across town, and realized I had just stepped into something much bigger and more dangerous than I could handle. That night, as I tucked Tommy into bed in our tiny apartment, he looked up at me with his big brown eyes, so much like my own, and asked, Mama, why do you look scared? I'm not scared, baby. I lied, kissing his forehead. Mama's just tired. But as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sirens wailing through Chicago's streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just taken a turn I wasn't prepared for. And somewhere across town, in his mansion full of secrets and danger, Vincent Romano was probably lying awake, too, carrying his own weight in the darkness. I had no idea that in just a few months, our worlds would collide in ways that would change everything. I had no idea that the man I was starting to care about was about to become the most dangerous person in my life, and the only one who could save it. 3 weeks later, Vincent started requesting me specifically for certain rooms. It began innocently enough. Maria would approach me with a slight frown and say, Mr. Romano wants you to clean his office today, or he's asked for you to handle the library again. At first, I thought I was in trouble. Maybe I had missed something or broken something valuable. But as the days passed, I began to realize he was creating opportunities for us to cross paths. It was subtle. He'd enter a room just as I was finishing, or he'd work at his desk while I dusted the bookshelves. We'd exchange brief conversations, nothing inappropriate, but each interaction left me more confused about what was happening between us. You have a college degree, he said one afternoon, watching me organize his bookshelf with obvious system and care. I paused, a leather-bound copy of Hemingway in my hands. How did you know that? The way you handle the books. The way you organize them. Most people just dust and move on. You actually read the spines, grouped them thoughtfully. He leaned back in his chair. What did you study? Literature and Spanish. I admitted, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. Not very practical as it turns out. Why aren't you teaching or working in publishing? The question hit too close to home. Life happened, I said simply, turning back to the books. Life, he repeated thoughtfully. That's a heavy word for someone so young. I'm not that young, I said, then immediately regretted the defensive tone. 24, he said, and my head snapped around. You looked into me. I look into everyone who works in my house, Isabella. But you're different from what I expected. Different how? He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those intense gray eyes. You're not afraid of me. Should I be? Most people are. I set down the book and turned to face him fully. I've been afraid my whole life, Mr. Romano. Afraid of not having enough money for rent. Afraid of getting sick and not being able to work. Afraid if I stopped myself before I mentioned Tommy. Afraid of what? Afraid of not being enough. I finished quietly. Being afraid of you would just be one more thing on a very long list. And honestly, I'm too tired to add anything else. Something in his expression softened. You work 3 jobs. You really did look into me. I needed to know who you were. But I didn't expect to find someone who works 18-hour days just to survive. Survival isn't glamorous, I said, trying to keep my voice light. But it's honest work. It is, he agreed. More honest than most of what happens in this house. The admission hung between us, heavy with implication. I knew I should change the subject, get back to work, maintain the professional distance that kept me safe. But instead, I heard myself asking, do you ever get tired of it? The weight you carry. His laugh was bitter every day. But this life, once you're in it, there's no clean way out. There's always a choice, I said softly. Is there? He stood up, moving to the window that overlooked his perfectly manicured garden. When I was 15, my father was murdered by a rival family. I could choose to let his killers go unpunished, let them destroy everything he built, or I could step up and take control. When I was 20, the Torino family tried to muscle in on our territory. I could choose to let them take what was ours, or I could fight back. Every choice led to another choice, and another until he gestured around the opulent office until this was all I knew how to be. But you're not just this, I said, surprising myself with my boldness. I see how you treat the staff here. I see how you work late into the night. How you carry the responsibility for dozens of families who depend on you. That's not just a criminal. That's a leader. He turned from the window, his eyes intense. You see too much, Isabella. Maybe you don't let people see enough. We stared at each other across the room, and I felt that dangerous pull again, the connection that had nothing to do with his power or wealth, and everything to do with the man underneath it all. That's when his phone rang, shattering the moment. Romano, he answered, his voice immediately shifting back to business mode. As he listened, his expression grew darker. When? A pause. How many? Another pause, and his jaw clenched. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at me. And for a moment, I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Worry, I have to go, he said, grabbing his suit jacket from the back of his chair. There's been an incident. Is everything okay? He paused at the door. Isabella, I need you to promise me something. What? If anything happens, if anyone comes here asking questions about me, about this house, about you, you call this number immediately. He pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to me. Don't hesitate. Don't think about it. Just call. I looked down at the card. It was simple, elegant, just a phone number embossed in silver. Mr. Romano, you're scaring me. Good, he said grimly. Fear will keep you safe. He left, and I stood alone in his office, holding the card and feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Through the window, I watched his black SUV speed down the driveway, followed by 2 more identical vehicles. I finished cleaning in a daze, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. What kind of incident required 3 cars full of armed men? What had I gotten myself into? That evening, as I picked up Tommy from daycare, I found myself looking over my shoulder more than usual. Mrs. Chun, who ran the daycare, noticed my distraction. You okay, Isabella? You seem nervous, just tired, I lied, scooping Tommy into my arms. Long day, but as we walked home through the darkening streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every stranger potentially dangerous. Mama, Tommy said as I buckled him into his car seat. Why are you shaking? I looked down at my hands and realized he was right. Mama's just cold, baby. But it wasn't cold that had me trembling. It was the growing realization that my feelings for Vincent Romano were pulling me into a world where people like me, people with something precious to protect, didn't survive. That night, I lay in bed with Vincent's business card on my nightstand, staring at it in the dim light from the street lamp outside. I thought about his words. Fear will keep you safe. But as I listened to Tommy's soft breathing beside me, I realized that fear wasn't enough anymore. I was falling for a man who lived in constant danger, and I had a son who depended on me to keep him safe. Something had to give. I just didn't know what. The incident Vincent had rushed off to handle turned out to be an attack on one of his warehouses. I learned this not from him, but from the whispered conversations of the other staff members over the next few days. 3 men had been hospitalized and a shipment worth $500,000 had been destroyed. Vincent didn't return to the house for 4 days. When he finally came back, it was late at night, and I was finishing up in the kitchen. I heard the front door slam, followed by heavy footsteps and what sounded like furniture being moved around roughly. Then silence. I should have finished cleaning and left. I should have minded my own business, but something in the way that door had slammed, something in the quality of the silence that followed, made me worry. I found him in his office, sitting in his chair with his head in his hands. His usually perfect suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, and there was a cut on his knuckles that looked fresh. "Mr. Romano," I said softly from the doorway. His head snapped up, and I saw exhaustion and something that looked like pain in his eyes. "Isabella, you should go home. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. I could see it in the tension in his shoulders, in the way he was favoring his left side slightly. "You're bleeding," I said, nodding toward his hand. He looked down at his knuckles like he'd forgotten about the injury. "It's nothing. Let me clean it." "Isabella, please," I said, stepping into the room. "You've been kind to me. Let me return the favor." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "There's a first aid kit in the bathroom." I retrieved the kit and returned to find him rolling up his sleeves. Up close, I could see the cut was deeper than I'd thought, and there were bruises forming on his forearms. "What happened?" I asked, gently cleaning the wound. "Business disagreement," he said tersely. "This kind of disagreement happens often in your line of work. More often than I'd like." I applied antiseptic, and he hissed slightly. "Sorry," I murmured. "You have gentle hands," he said quietly. I looked up and found him watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. We were so close I could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. "Isabella," he said, his voice rough. "Yes, you should be afraid of me." "I know, but you're not." "No," I whispered. "I'm not." His hand came up to cut my cheek, and I leaned into the touch without thinking. "You should run," he said. "You should take whatever life you're protecting and run as far from me as possible." My heart stopped. What life I'm protecting? His thumb traced my cheekbone. "I know you have secrets, Isabella. I can see it in your eyes. The way you check your phone constantly. The way you rush out of here every evening like someone's waiting for you. The way you work 3 jobs but live in a studio apartment that costs $600 a month." I pulled back, panic flooding through me. "I don't know what you mean." "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quickly, "or whoever you're protecting. But I need you to understand. Being close to me puts people in danger. The Torino family. They don't just come after me. They come after everything I care about." "And do you?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Care about me?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. "Then more than I should, more than is safe." "Vincent?" I breathed, and hearing his name on my lips seemed to break something in him. He stood abruptly, putting distance between us. "You need to quit." "What? This job?" "You need to quit and stay away from me." "I can't," I said, standing too. "I need this job. I need the money. I'll give you money enough to get by until you find something else. I don't want your charity." "It's not charity. It's survival." His voice was sharp with frustration. "Don't you understand? The Torino family is escalating. They're not just hitting my businesses anymore. They're looking for weaknesses, for pressure points. And you," he ran his hands through his hair, "you're becoming a weakness." The words hit me like a slap. "I see." "No, you don't see," he said, moving toward me again. "You think I'm rejecting you, but I'm trying to protect you. There's a difference." "Is there?" I asked, wrapping my arms around myself. "Because from where I'm standing, it feels the same." "Isabella, I'll finish out the week," I said, moving toward the door. "Then I'll find something else." "Wait." His voice stopped me at the threshold. "I need you to know if things were different." If I were different, I turned back to look at him. This powerful man who suddenly seemed lost. "But they're not different, and neither are you." I left him standing in his office, and as I walked through the empty mansion, I felt tears burning my eyes. I had been stupid to think there could be anything between us. I was a cleaning lady with a secret son, and he was the head of a crime family. We lived in different worlds, and I had been foolish to think love could bridge that gap. But as I drove home through the quiet streets, I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd touched my face, the way he'd said my name like a prayer. And I couldn't stop thinking about his words more than I should, more than is safe. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the black sedan that had been following me since I left the mansion. My blood turned to ice as I realized what was happening. I thought about Vincent's warnings, about the business card in my purse, about the dangerous world I had somehow stumbled into. And I thought about Tommy sleeping peacefully in our apartment, completely unaware that his mother had just become a target. I reached for my phone with shaking hands. But before I could dial Vincent's number, the sedan's headlights flashed twice in my rearview mirror, a signal. They wanted me to know they were there. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to a 24-hour diner across town and sat in a corner booth, watching the parking lot and trying to think. The black sedan hadn't followed me there. Or if it had, it was staying well hidden. My hands shook as I dialed Mrs. Chin's emergency number. Isabella, it's almost midnight. Is everything okay? Mrs. Chun, I need a huge favor. Can Tommy stay with you tonight? I'll pay extra. There's a family emergency. Of course, honey. He's already asleep in the spare room anyway. But are you all right? You sound scared. I'm fine. I lied. I'll pick him up tomorrow after work. I hung up and stared at Vincent's business card, weighing my options. If I called him, I'd be admitting that I was in danger because of him. I'd be pulling him deeper into my life, revealing the secret I'd worked so hard to protect. But if I didn't call him and something happened to me, what would happen to Tommy? I was still debating when my phone rang. Vincent's name flashed on the screen. Isabella, where are you? How did you? My security system shows you left the house 40 minutes ago, but you never made it home. Where are you? I closed my eyes, realizing he'd been having me watch the diner on Ashland Avenue. Stay there. I'm coming to get you. Vincent, I can't. You called me Vincent, he said quietly. You've never done that before. This isn't the time. Isabella, listen to me very carefully. Do not leave that diner. Do not go to your apartment. Do not go anywhere alone. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The line went dead, and I sat in the fluorescent-lit diner, nursing a cup of coffee and watching every car that passed. 15 minutes felt like hours. When Vincent finally walked through the door, I felt a relief so profound it scared me. He was dressed in all black, and there was something different about him. Something harder, more dangerous than the man I'd been bandaging just hours before. He slid into the booth across from me, his eyes scanning the room before settling on my face. Tell me what happened. A black sedan followed me from your house. They wanted me to know they were there. His jaw clenched. License plate. I was too scared to look. It's okay, he said, reaching across the table to cover my hand with his. You did the right thing by not going home. How did you know I was in trouble? Because I had someone watching you, he admitted. And he reported that you were being followed. You've been having me watched since the day the Torinos threatened me in my house. I told you. They look for weaknesses, pressure points. I couldn't risk them finding you. I stared at him, processing this information. So, you knew I was in danger, but you still told me to quit. I told you to quit because you're in danger. He said, Isabella, these people, they don't just threaten, they act. And if they think you matter to me, do I? I asked. Matter to you? He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. Yes, he said finally. Too much. Then help me understand, I said. Help me understand your world because I'm already in it whether I want to be or not. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand that someone followed me tonight. I understand that I'm scared to go home. I understand that you're the only person who can help me. I took a shaky breath. And I understand that I'm falling in love with you, even though I know I shouldn't. The words hung between us, raw and honest. Vincent's hand tightened on mine. Isabella, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I know it's crazy. I know we're from different worlds, but I can't help how I feel. If you stay in my world, there's no going back, he said. Once you're in, you're in. And the people I love, they become targets. I'm already a target. Not like this. Not really. Right now, you're just someone who works for me. But if you become more than that, what if I want to become more than that? He studied my face in the harsh diner lighting. There are things about me you don't know. Things I've done. I know enough. Do you? He leaned forward. I've killed people, Isabella. Not in self-defense. Not by accident. I've looked men in the eye and pulled the trigger because they threatened what was mine. I felt a chill run through me, but I didn't pull my hand away. Were they good men? What? The men you killed? Were they good men who didn't deserve it? Or were they men who hurt innocent people? He blinked, clearly not expecting that question. They were men who sold drugs to children, who trafficked women, who killed families for money. Then you did what you had to do to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. It's not that simple, isn't it? I interrupted. Vincent, I've been poor my whole life. I've seen what happens when there's no one to stand up to the predators, no one to protect the vulnerable. Maybe your methods aren't conventional, but your intentions, you're romanticizing this, he said. But his voice was uncertain. No, I'm not. I'm seeing you. The real you. The man who works 18-hour days to take care of the families who depend on him. The man who treats his staff with respect. The man who's trying to protect me, even though it would be easier to just let me go. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of my words settling between us. There's something else, I said finally. Something I need to tell you. What? I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was about to say would change everything. I have a son. Vincent went very still. What? His name is Tommy. He's 3 years old. His father left when I was pregnant, and it's just been the two of us ever since. Tears started flowing down my cheeks. That's why I work 3 jobs. That's why I can't afford to quit. That's why I'm so scared right now. Because if something happens to me, he has no one. Vincent stared at me for a long moment, processing this revelation. Where is he now? Safe with his daycare provider. Isabella, he said slowly. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid you'd see me differently as a liability or a complication or as someone with even more reason to be protected, he finished quietly. I looked up at him through my tears. What? You think having a child makes you less valuable to me? Isabella, it makes you more precious than you could possibly imagine. I don't understand. He slid out of his side of the booth and moved to sit beside me, pulling me against his chest. I grew up without a father for most of my life. I know what it's like to watch your mother struggle, to feel helpless and scared. I would never let that happen to your son. Vincent, what's his name again? Tommy. Tommy, he repeated softly. I'd like to meet him someday. When this is all over, when it's safe. I pulled back to look at him. You mean that? I mean it. He cupped my face in his hands. Isabella, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Okay. Will you let me protect you, both of you? It means staying close to me, living in my world, accepting my protection. It means giving up your independence, at least temporarily, and it means trusting me completely. I thought about Tommy sleeping peacefully at Mrs. Chen's house. I thought about the black sedan, about the fear I'd felt driving through the dark streets. I thought about Vincent's hands on my face, gentle despite the violence they were capable of. Yes, I whispered. He kissed me then, soft and desperate, like he'd been holding back for months. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. Then we need to go, he said. Right now? It's not safe to stay here any longer. Where are we going? To get Tommy, he said, and then home to my home where I can keep you both safe. As we left the diner together, Vincent's arm around my waist, I felt like I was stepping across a threshold into a new life, a dangerous life, but one where I wouldn't have to face the darkness alone. I just hoped I was strong enough for what was coming. 2 years later, I'm standing in the kitchen of Vincent's mansion, our mansion now, watching Tommy chase Vincent's dog around the backyard. At 5 years old, Tommy has Vincent wrapped around his little finger, and Vincent has embraced fatherhood with the same intensity he brings to everything else in his life. Mama, look, Tommy calls out, waving from the swing set Vincent had installed last spring. Daddy's pushing me really high. Daddy. The word still makes my heart skip a beat. Vincent adopted Tommy 6 months after we moved in together. And watching them together, this powerful, dangerous man being completely undone by a little boy's laughter, never gets old. The Torino family is no longer a threat. Vincent handled that situation with characteristic efficiency, though he's never told me the details. I've learned not to ask about certain aspects of his business, and he's learned to leave that world at the door when he comes home to us. Mrs. Romano, Maria says, appearing beside me with a smile. She still works here, though now as head of household staff rather than just housekeeper. Mr. Romano called. He'll be home for dinner. Mrs. Romano, I'm still getting used to that, too. We married last fall in a small ceremony in the mansion's garden with Tommy as ring bearer and Vincent's entire extended family in attendance. It was the first time I truly understood the scope of the organization Vincent leads. Not just criminals, but families, children, grandparents, people who depend on him for their livelihood and protection. Thank you, Maria. I say, still watching my boys in the yard. My phone buzzes with a text from Vincent. bringing home a surprise for Tommy and flowers for my beautiful wife. See you soon. I smile, typing back. We'll be waiting. As I put my phone away, I think about that terrified woman who sat in a diner 2 years ago, afraid to go home, afraid to trust, afraid to love. I think about the choice I made that night, to step into Vincent's world, to accept his protection, to build a life with him despite all the reasons it shouldn't work. It hasn't been easy. There have been moments of fear, times when Vincent's business required him to be away for days, occasions when I've had to trust that the man I love would come home safe. But there have also been moments of pure joy. Watching Vincent teach Tommy to ride a bike, seeing him at school plays and soccer games, witnessing him become not just a husband, but a father. Mama. Tommy runs up to me breathless and grinning. Daddy says we're having pizza for dinner. Does he now? I laugh, ruffling his dark hair. And what makes Daddy think he gets to decide what we're having for dinner? Because I'm the boss, Vincent says, appearing in the doorway with a bouquet of white roses and a pizza box from Tommy's favorite restaurant. You're the boss of a lot of things, I say, going to kiss him. Hello. But in this kitchen, I'm the boss. Yes, ma'am, he says with a grin, pulling me close. How was your day? Good. I finished the final edits on the children's book. My editor thinks it'll be ready for publication by Christmas. Vincent's face lights up with pride. That's incredible, baby. After we moved in together, Vincent encouraged me to pursue my writing. I've published 3 children's books now with a 4th on the way. It's not the career I originally planned, but it's one that allows me to work from home, to be present for Tommy, and to use my literature degree in a way that brings me joy. Can we read it tonight? Tommy asks, climbing onto Vincent's lap. Of course, I say. But first, pizza and homework. As we sit around the kitchen table, Vincent helping Tommy with his math while I grade papers from the literacy program I volunteer with. I'm struck by how normal this feels, how domestic and peaceful, despite the armed guards at the gate and the bulletproof glass in the windows. Vincent catches me staring and raises an eyebrow. What? Just thinking about how much has changed? I say. Regrets? He asks quietly. None. I say firmly. Not a single one. Later that night, after Tommy is asleep and Vincent has finished his evening calls, we sit together on the balcony overlooking the garden. The city lights twinkle in the distance, and I can hear the faint sound of traffic from the streets below. I have something to tell you, I say, taking his hand. Good something or bad something? Good something. Very good something. He turns to face me fully. Isabella, I'm pregnant. I whisper. The words hang in the air between us. And for a moment, Vincent is completely still. Then his face breaks into the biggest smile I've ever seen. Are you sure? I took 3 tests this morning. I'm sure. He pulls me into his arms, spinning me around despite the fact that we're sitting down. When? 7 months. Just in time for summer. Tommy's going to be so excited, he says, his voice thick with emotion. Are you excited? Excited doesn't begin to cover it, he says, cupping my face in his hands. Isabella, you've given me everything I never knew I wanted. A family, a home, a reason to be better than I was. You were already good, I say. I just helped you see it. I love you, he says, kissing me softly. More than I thought it was possible to love someone. I love you too, I whisper against his lips as we sit together under the stars, planning for our growing family and dreaming about the future. I think about that night 2 years ago when a little boy knocked on Vincent's door and said they took my mom. Except it wasn't Tommy who knocked. It was a neighbor's child, scared and seeking help. But that moment, that night, led to everything we have now. Sometimes the most dangerous choices lead to the most beautiful destinations. Sometimes stepping into the unknown is the only way to find home. And sometimes love really is enough to bridge any gap, overcome any obstacle, and create something extraordinary from the most unlikely circumstances. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, hit like and share it with someone who believes love conquers all. Until next time.